In today's video, I'll be showing you how I created this fabric cover junk journal. To make the cover, I used an old book that I picked up from a thrift store, and I'll be using this fabric, which I found a sample of at a local secondhand shop. To start, I cut out a small piece of this fabric to cover the inner spine, and I gutted my book by removing all of the original book pages. I am using Mod Podge to glue down that piece of fabric, and I'm just using a brush to apply it. What I found worked really well is first adhering the fabric to the middle of the spine and then working towards the outer edges. Once I was finished applying the glue, I just closed the book and let the glue dry for a couple of minutes before working on the outside cover. For the outside cover, I cut out a piece of fabric that is about ½ an inch wider than the book cover on all four sides, and I'm using the same gluing technique to attach this piece of fabric as well. So I'm starting again with the spine, and once that is glued down, I work on the front and back covers. Since my fabric is on the thicker side, I'm able to be pretty generous with the glue here. I'm also using a ruler to make sure that the fabric really gets into the spine, and I really want to emphasize that line that connects the spine to each of the covers. And once that is done, I'm just gluing down the back cover. I also cut off a triangle from each of the four corners of the fabric, and I'm doing this to make it look nicer when I fold the fabrics over the edges of the book. I'm not being super careful with this because I plan on covering the corners using some decorative book corners, so I'm not super concerned with this looking perfect. And now I'm just applying glue so that I can wrap this fabric around the edge of the book. I noticed that my fabric wasn't sticking down right away, so I used these clips to help the fabric lay flat against the book, and once the glue dried, the fabric stayed in place, so I found that using these clips was very useful. And once I did that to all four of the edges, I'm applying those decorative book corners. I'm using some pliers to clamp down the book corners. I noticed that the pliers were scratching them up a bit, so if you know of a better way of doing this, please let me know. And now the only thing that I have to do is cover up the inside cover using a piece of cardstock, and my cover is now complete. So now I'm ready to sew in my signatures. I found that the best way of doing this is by cutting out a piece of paper that is the same size as my spine as a guide for where I want to poke the holes to sew in my signatures. So for this journal, I'm doing a 3-hole pamphlet stitch. So I have 3 rows where each row has 5 holes for 5 signatures. And this guide will make it easier for my signatures to line up straight. And I'm also using an awl to poke these holes through the spine. I found that the awl makes it really easy to poke holes, so I definitely recommend using this tool. So here I'm showing you some of the papers that I'll be including in my junk journal. These are some used books that I got at a local shop. This is a music book, and I also have a children's book. I'm also using a pad of 8x8 scrapbook papers, which is full of maps and other vintage designs. And I'm also using some printer papers, as well as other scraps of paper that I have from previous projects. And I've tried tea dyeing a lot of these papers because I feel intimidated when I have blank white pages in my journals, so I kind of wanted to try something different. Now I'm organizing my papers into 5 different signatures, and I'm deciding how I want them to be arranged in my book. Once I have my signatures the way I like them, I clip them together using a bunch of paper clips, and I'm pretty careful with this, so I put like 6 paper clips on each signature. And then I use the guide that I made earlier for poking holes in my spine to mark where I need to poke holes in the signature, and this will make sure that the holes will line up. I actually lost the footage of me sewing in that first signature, so I'm just skipping ahead to the last signature instead. Sewing in the signatures is probably the hardest part of this entire process, in my opinion, but once you get the hang of it, it isn't too bad. So I'm using a bookbinding needle, which is basically a needle that is long and blunt, and also has an eye that is big enough to fit the thread that I'm using. I'm actually using a hemp cord, which is nice because it's thick and sturdy and makes me feel like the pages will be secure inside of my book. But using a thicker thread can also make it more difficult to sew in your signatures because it's harder to get the needle through the holes in the spine. So you'll probably see me struggling with that a few times throughout this video. Another thing that I'm really careful of when I'm sewing in my signatures is making sure that the thread is very tight against the spine of the book, because I don't want my signatures to be able to wiggle around in my journal. Especially after I start adding things into the journal, I really don't want my papers to be wobbling around. So once I'm ready to secure my signature, I just take the 2 ends of the thread and cross them over each other so that they're in opposite directions, and really tie the 2 threads very tightly together, and then tie a knot to secure it. And then I just use my scissors to clip off some of that excess thread. So here's the flip through of how it turned out. This is the second junk journal that I've made so far, and I'm just having so much fun with it. I'm going to be starting a new series on my channel where I decorate this junk journal and fill it up with little bits and bobs from my life, and I'm very excited to share that with you all. If you're interested in junk journals or any type of journaling, then please subscribe to my channel and leave me a comment about what kind of videos you'd like to see. I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.